The fact that Trump decided to stand up and fight this when other presidents capitulated. Other presidents were blackmailed by J. Edgar Hoover. Kennedy was assassinated. There was an assassination attempt against Reagan. And every other president since that time has been a tool of these networks. And the fact that the president stood up and fought, he deserves tremendous commendation for that. But he's done this under a crossfire that's been incredible.
Hey friends, this one is brought to you in part by Rugged Reserves. The Patriot Charger is a must-have survival tool for your car. Not only will it charge your phone, it's got a flashing red emergency beacon, a seatbelt cutter, and a window breaker, all very handy to have in an emergency. And it's always within reach because the Patriot Charger plugs into your car's cigarette lighter outlet. By the way, it's also a portable power bank. The Patriot Charger is so much more than just a cell phone charger. It's a survival tool that can save your life. So get yours today. Supplies are running out, and you can save 25% with code SGT25. I'll leave the link below this video. Now, friends, this interview with Harley Schlanger was supposed to include Bill Binney as well, but our signals got crossed, and Bill missed this one, but he will be on later this month. But without further ado, our friend Harley Schlanger. Harley, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Sean. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for coming on. We've got so much to talk about, namely the real collusion and obstruction. Let's kick it off with this soundbite from Rudy Giuliani, who I think frames it up quite nicely.
The only person who actually apparently has done business with the Russians is Hillary. And I think she's going to be in for quite an extensive investigation, and she doesn't have Jim Comey to fix the case for her this time.
I think that's very well said. No more James Comey in the Hillary camp, Harley, and there's a big report about James Comey specifically that will be coming out within the next 12 to 14 days, maybe even sooner than that, and it's going to cause a whole lot of problems for the deep state and Comey specifically. Where would you like to begin this conversation really about the Mueller report, which exonerates President Trump from any obstruction and any collusion with Russia, which we all knew?
I would start by saying the other thing who's not around anymore to mess things up is Jeff Sessions, who more by omission allowed things to happen that cost the country 2 years where there could have been some real progress. Look, I think that the most important thing is that Donald Trump has made it clear in the last week, going back to Thursday, when he backed up the statement by former CIA agent Larry Johnson, who laid out the story of the GCHQ in Britain, from the Five Eyes, the equivalent of the NSA in Britain, that they did spy on Trump, the Trump campaign. And now the story is coming out from 30 different directions of the setup that was done, the sting operations by the CIA, the FBI, and the British, including Papadopoulos, Carter Page, characters such as Joseph Mifsud, this mysterious figure who, for some reason, Mueller, the super sleuth, still gave some credibility that he might be a Russian, when in fact we know that's just not the case. Mifsud is a Maltese guy who's tied to British intelligence. So you're right, there's so much that's coming out now, and it's only a matter of time. But when Trump started pointing the finger at the British, and when Trump then made it clear that he's going to let all the story come out, there's no place for these guys to hide anymore. And I think that's very important. And if we don't clean it up, the country's finished, because these networks are going to destroy Trump and destroy the United States.
Well, you got that right. And I continue to be amused by people who leave comments saying nothing's going to change, nothing's happening, nobody's going to get arrested, no high-level people will be arrested, when I've got sound bites coming from people like Joe DeGeneva and others close to the president saying exactly the opposite, and President Trump himself vowing to declassify the very documents that will expose these deep state traitors. Listen to this.
Will you declassify the FISA applications, Gang of Eight material, those 302s, or what we call on this program the bucket of five?
Yes, everything is going to be declassified, and more, much more than what you just mentioned. It'll all be declassified, and I'm glad I waited, because I thought that maybe they would obstruct if I did it early, and I think I was right. So I'm glad I waited, and now the Attorney General can take a very strong look at whatever it is, but it will be declassified and more than what you just mentioned.
And more than just the FISA will be declassified here, Harley. And it was Joe DeGeneva who frames this up nicely. FISA is at the heart of this deep state coup against our sitting president. Listen to this.
The FISA court abuse is the center of this entire abuse of governmental power. And the chief judge of that court has already ruled that the FBI broke the law and that the people at the head of the Justice Department, Sally Yates, John Carlin, the Assistant Attorney General for the National Security, all knew about it and lied to the court, the FISA court, about it.
Harley, is this the biggest domestic spy scandal in the history of the United States? And is it illegal? Is it treason? Because I'm hearing a new narrative now from CNN saying, oh, there may have been some spying, but it was all done by the book.
Well, where does the book say that the president of the United States can order his intelligence services to try to defeat the candidate from the opposing party? There's nothing by the book about this. And this also goes to what Susan Rice texted to herself, that Obama wants everything done by the book. That's complete nonsense. Look, here's the real story. And you and I have talked about this before, and turns out we were right and everybody else was wrong. There was a decision made that if Trump got in, minimally, he would disrupt the normal channel of operations, which is Washington and London with NATO, with the European Union, running backroom deals for corporate elites, for the financial institutions, at the expense of the nations involved. And so they decided they had to stop Trump. And when it became clear that he was serious about talking to Putin and working out a cooperative agreement with Putin, talking to Xi Jinping and resolving some of the trade differences and bringing the United States and China together in a number of areas, including economic, this blew apart the whole post-Cold War order, which was constructed by George Herbert Walker Bush, included Bill Clinton's operation, especially Bush Jr. and then Obama. This is the way the United States has been run minimally since the weakening of Ronald Reagan in his second term, and even before that, since the assassination of Kennedy. This is what the shadow government or the deep state is. And it includes the operation out of London, the so-called Five Eyes. Now, what's most important about what the president is saying is he wants it all out there, including the Christopher Steele report. The Christopher Steele report is crucial because it was used in the FISA documents by the FBI knowing that it was false, knowing that these were not Putin intelligence agents who were providing information or that Putin had anything on Trump. It was all concocted. And the same people then concocted the Russia hacking story using Mifsud trying to set up George Papadopoulos to say that, yes, the Russians have the emails, the whole attack on WikiLeaks, all of this was orchestrated. And one of the things Bill Binney has done, a great service that he's done, the former technical director of the NSA, is he did the actual forensic investigation, which demonstrates that the so-called hacking could not have taken place based on the speed with which it occurred. It had to have been done by some internal drive, a download, a flash drive or something. And he proved this in 3 or 4 different ways. Now, he also makes the point that Mueller never called on him, even though he was one of the leading experts in the world on cyber warfare. More importantly, the FBI and Mueller never investigated the computers. And so you have all this evidence that this was a fraud concocted from the beginning. And then look at what else came up around this, Sean, the false flag about Syrian chemical weapons, the false flag about the Skripals. We were put on a course toward nuclear war with Russia by people like Brennan and Comey and Clapper, the so-called deep state networks. And so this has to come out, and I'm extremely happy that Trump is talking about it this way. The congressional hearings from the House side, because they're run by the Democrats, will be a new cover-up, an attempt to prove what we already know didn't happen, which is no collusion. The collusion illusion is dead. But in the Senate, there may be very significant investigations into what was going on in the Justice Department. The fact that the Justice Department at the highest levels, the FBI at the highest levels, the CIA, the NSA, were involved in a coup against the president, besides that being astounding on the face of it, what's even more incredible is the silence from most of the media when the president came out and said there was a coup against him. So, you're doing yeoman work here to get this story out. There are handfuls of people who are getting it out. And I think now it's going to go viral. And sooner or later, people are going to realize what a swindle this whole thing was. And you're right. This is the biggest scandal that's ever been run in presidential politics.
Well, I think that there's probably never been a bigger, more important story that would give the alternative media the credibility it so direly deserves, Harley, because the enemies of freedom and liberty like to say that we're all conspiracy theorists, and there are no conspiracies. This is the single biggest conspiracy of my lifetime because it shows the deep state and it names the names. We know who these people are. I'll play another clip here from Joe DeGeneva in a second, but let's circle back. You mentioned Bill Binney's work. He was a 30-year crypt analyst at the NSA, and you're right. He looked at the data from Guccifer 2 that claimed it was Russia, and when you look at the data, it shows that this stuff was downloaded at 49 megabits a second, which is impossible from an overseas location by hackers. And Binney did the tests to prove that. And the fastest
5 different locations.
5 different locations, and the fastest rate that they could get was 12 megabytes per second. But it goes beyond that. We know Kim.com offered up evidence to Mueller that he said he had that shows that the leaker, you're right, it was done locally by a guy probably named Seth Rich, who then Podesta in those leaked emails says, I'm all for making an example of the leaker. And then Seth Rich was murdered. We still don't know who murdered him, but I have my suspicions. So the biggest single thing here that I want to share with people is that the real collusion, the real conspiracy was done at the highest levels of the DNC, Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, John Podesta, and then with their cohorts in the deep state intelligence agencies, James Clapper, John Brennan. This is the biggest conspiracy of my lifetime, Harley, and I want to see some heads roll. The American people want to see justice.
And Sean, one other point there. Don't forget Obama, who is overseeing the whole thing. And don't leave out the British, because this is the one weakness of people like Sean Hannity and others, because they're still trying to blame Russia. And one of the important things that Binney and his friends with the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity are doing, and what we've been doing from LaRouche PAC, is showing that this is a tradition of the British to mess with U.S. elections, U.S. presidents, U.S. foreign policy, U.S. economic policy, and then blame someone else. And the danger of this is, as I said, as Trump was being pushed in a direction by people like Bolton and Pompeo and Pence toward confrontation with Russia, instead of having a dialogue with Russia, we have the Democrats and Republicans joining together to point fingers at Russia. Now, imagine what would happen if they brought Putin in or someone from the Russians to actually testify before the Congress. Because Putin has been clear on this, and Trump admitted he believes Putin and not the U.S. intelligence agencies. That shows you how deep the scandal goes.
Well, that's right. And I'm amused by the fact that CNN and the mainstream Mockingbird horror media like to say that the Mueller investigation was a success because it resulted in indictments and jail time for people like Manafort, General Flynn, Papadopoulos, when all of this stuff against these guys was a catfishing expedition by the deep state to try to frame them. Here's a wonderful soundbite from George Papadopoulos. This interview comes from Flecka's Talks on YouTube. An excellent, excellent interview with George Papadopoulos. The deep state didn't think this guy, Papadopoulos, would continue to speak out and speak the truth he's now speaking. And it just destroys their whole story. Listen to how he was framed, Harley. Listen to this, guys.
Here's where things get very strange, and what I think the investigation now into this guy is going to try and explain. A week after I meet this guy in Rome, I'm in my office in London at this London Center for International Law Practice, and they're like, you have to go meet Mifsud again. I'm like, why do I have to meet Joseph Mifsud? He's like, because he's going to introduce you to the niece of Vladimir Putin. And I'm like, I just met him, and now he's introducing me to the niece of Vladimir Putin. This is like amazing.
Yeah.
And the company itself, which I explained is run by like the MI6 and FBI, is telling me go meet him and her.
I'll pause it there. So he was set up, he was framed. And this all, you're right, it all goes back to GCHQ, MI6, working with the deep state conspirators here in this country, Clapper, Brennan. This is just the biggest story of our lifetimes. And because President Trump is president and the witch isn't in the White House, they can't cover it up, Harley. It's all coming out. And CNN can't stop it. Wolf Blitzer can't stop it. Anderson Cooper can't stop it. This is the biggest news story of our lifetimes.
This is important. One of the points you just made, the fact that Trump decided to stand up and fight this when other presidents capitulated. Other presidents were blackmailed by J. Edgar Hoover. Kennedy was assassinated. There's an assassination attempt against Reagan. And every other president since that time has been a tool of these networks. Now, Clapper and Brennan don't control anything. They're operatives working for this higher order of what Binney and others call the shadow government, what LaRouche has always called the British Empire, because the marching orders come from the same people who control NATO, the same people who control the City of London and Wall Street. They have a world order which is threatened right now. It's threatened by their own stupidity, their own corruption, their own incompetence, and they're trying to sustain control by using wars, false flags, terrorism, to just whip the population into a state of submission. And the fact that the president stood up and fought, he deserves tremendous commendation for that. And people who are attacking him by saying he's an Israeli agent, and, look, he's made some bad decisions on policy. He's had some bad people in there, but he's done this under a crossfire that's been incredible. And what we have to do is get behind him, but with a program to solve it. The declassification is the important first step. Secondly, he's got to clean out the intelligence community, including people who he's appointed, like Bolton, and I think Pompeo's a pretty bad character right now. But the other thing, the intelligence community, like the FBI, this Mifsud story that Papadopoulos is telling is a classic example of an FBI sting, where the FBI plants the story, they plant the evidence, they create the crime, and then they go in and arrest the person they planted it with. This is what the sting operations were with Abscam and Brylab. Maybe that goes back before people's time. But this is what J. Edgar Hoover did with Martin Luther King. This is the classic operation of British intelligence. And by exposing it and breaking it, this could free the country in a way that would lead to an extraordinary transformation of the United States. And one of the most important things, it would take away the demoralization that most people feel and maybe inspire people to get more involved in running the country the way the citizens are supposed to in a republic.
Yeah, make America great again. I mean, it sounds trite, but good Lord. I mean, either we have a country with borders or we don't. Either we have liberty and a rule of law and a constitution and a Bill of Rights, or we don't. It's that simple. Harley?
Exactly.
Go ahead.
One point I just wanted to comment on what you said about conspiracy theories. The person I worked with for the last 40 years, Lyndon LaRouche, died a couple months ago. And instead of obituaries, there were slanders in the New York Times, the Washington Post, most of the international media. And what do they say what LaRouche is? A conspiracy theorist. Now, LaRouche has been proven absolutely right about the dirty nature of the British Empire and the financial networks in the United States that take their orders from London. This isn't, as you said, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's reality, it's truth. And if people realized that they're being blindsided by this argument that it's a conspiracy theory, then you have to take the hood off your head, take a look around and say, well, what should we do? And I think that's where we are right now. We're at a point where this still could go in a bad direction because you have a lot of crazies in the Democratic Party and unfortunately a lot of really rotten people in the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. But the American people, by electing Trump, showed they wanted a change. And I think that's what Trump is doing with these rallies, going out and talking to the people. And it's really crucial that that continue.
You mentioned Abscam earlier in the FBI's propensity to want to frame people. Was that John DeLorean? Was that the John DeLorean story?
Well, that was one of the stories. Abscam and Brylab was where they had people dressed up as Saudis coming in with buckets of money to bribe congressmen. Oh,
that's right. Look, it's just, it seems to be all the FBI is good at. Every time there's one of these bombers, if they, the Times Square bomber, I mean, every time there's one of these stories of the FBI running in at the last second to stop an act of terror, we find out they handled the patsy. They provided the bomb. They set the mentally retarded person up. And then the Mockingbird mainstream horror media gleefully reports it as an FBI victory. I think people are really sick and tired of this kind of criminality at the highest levels of our government. And there's no better example of it than this two-faced liar, this cover-up artist for Hillary Clinton, James Comey. So it's my hope this report that DeGeneva said on Fox News is coming out in the next 2 weeks, and he said that 3, 4, 5 days ago. I hope that this he said it's going to be a bombshell report. And I hope Comey does time. Comey needs to go to jail.
And I think Comey's in big trouble. But you know who the other person who's in trouble is Mueller. You know, Mueller goes back to the 1980s when he was appointed by William Weld as U.S. Attorney in Massachusetts. His first case was to run the Get LaRouche task force against Lyndon LaRouche because they accused LaRouche of being a Soviet agent back in the 80s. The same MO used by Mueller. Now, remember, in 2003, Mueller, as FBI director, testified before the Congress that it's absolutely proven that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. So how this man is promoted as a straight arrow, I mean, the interesting thing is that he knew from within the first couple of weeks of the investigation of Trump that there was no collusion. Why did it take 2 years before the report came out?
I know.
Why not just say that right away? Because they were hoping to break Trump or drive him crazy or do something that would enable them to impeach the guy.
Right.
So again, I think we're talking about an absolutely evil gang of scoundrels who deserve a lot of time in yellow suits, or orange suits, I should say, and a president and his networks that represent the hope for the future, that we can get the situation right with Russia, with China, that we can straighten out the Europeans, because there's a lot happening here in Europe. The European Union is, I think, on its last legs right now. So there's a lot of reason for hope, but we can't just leave it up to Trump or leave it up to secret committees. The American people have to be talking about it, studying it, figuring out how we were hoodwinked. So
there has to be trials, Harley. There has to be trials. And I think that's what's coming. I think trials are coming. I think indictments are coming. I've got a soundbite I got to play from Joe DeGeneva here because I think Mueller walks. I don't think Mueller's going to do a stitch of time, but I think people like John Brennan will. Listen to this.
It has been evident from day one that there was a brazen plot to exonerate Hillary Clinton illegally, and then if she lost the election, to frame Donald Trump. This dossier was a knowing part of that. It was created by Hillary Clinton. It was created knowingly by John Brennan as part of a scheme to do everything they could to harm Donald Trump.
They paid $1.1 million for the phony Steele dossier.
The problem for Brennan and Clapper and Comey and Baker and all of them now is that the FISA court has already communicated with the Justice Department about its findings. And their findings are that for more than 4 years before the election of Donald Trump, there was an illegal spying operation going on by FBI contractors, 4 of them, to steal personal information, electronic information about Americans, and to use it against the Republican Party. There are going to be indictments. There's going to be grand juries. John Brennan isn't going to need 1 lawyer. He's going to need 5.
So perp walks, indictments, arrests. Do you agree with DeGeneva? Do you think this is actually going to happen, or is that just a Trump insider lawyer giving us the positive talking points for his team?
Well, first of all, what he said is true about Brennan and others. Secondly, they should face the music. A day of reckoning must take place. Now, whether it will or not, that's why I say it depends on more than just President Trump. It really depends on the American people not shrugging their shoulders and saying this is business as usual. This is not business as usual. this is business as usual in poor, backward, third world countries, not in the United States of America. And if we don't want this to happen again, and this is what Trump has said, he's going to fight this out because he doesn't want another president to have to go through this in the future. Right. So I think there very well could be these kinds of trials. If there are, they must be as public as possible. And people like Bill Binney, the Geneva, Larry Johnson, these are people who have to be heard, people who are insiders in the intelligence community. And then don't forget Julian Assange. You know, here's a guy who, what was his crime? He reported on war crimes committed by this shadow government. For that he's facing the death penalty. You know, I think it's crucial that the stories come out into the open, and we at LaRouche PAC are going to continue to do our job getting the story out. And I know, Sean, you will, and a handful of others will, and hopefully at some point the mainstream media is either going to collapse as it has. I mean, CNN and MSNBC are way down in viewership. So they're either going to collapse or they're going to do a mea culpa and try and pretend everything's okay.
All right. Well, as we wrap this up, let's talk about some of the heroes in this story. One of them, of course, is Devin Nunes. The other, of course, I think is Julian Assange. And you're right. If he's allowed to testify, if he's actually extradited to the United States, and by the way, I think he's in grave danger as long as he's in the UK. That's my opinion. But if he is actually brought here and if he's allowed to testify, there's no way he doesn't spill the beans about Seth Rich and about who the real leakers were, where the real data came from. It did not come to him from Russian hackers. Harley, anybody who has studied this story knows that it wasn't Russian hackers that provided WikiLeaks with the Podesta Clinton emails. It was Seth Rich.
Assange said it, and his closest collaborators, 2 or 3 of them, have also said that they know it was not. And Bill Binney said that there are reports of the flash drive having been handed over to one of Assange's associates in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, this has to come out. Assange is a hero in standing up for this, and too bad the Ecuadorian government had its nuts cut off.
Yeah. Well, the other hero, and it needs to be said, in this story is Admiral Mike Rogers. And here's a headline from NPR dated November 22nd, 2016. NSA head meets with Trump team, but doesn't give Obama a heads up. Gotta love how these mockingbirds spin every story to their side, making Mike Rogers out to be the bad guy for meeting at Trump Tower with the Trump team and alerting Trump to the fact that he was being spied on. His campaign was being spied on. Mike Rogers is a hero in this story because had he not done that, these people may have gotten away with it.
Yeah. Well, you know, 2 other people I would say deserve mention in that light. One is Paul Manafort, who, despite potentially shady financial dealings, had nothing to do with collusion, nothing to do with operating on behalf of Putin, and refused to capitulate to the brutal tactics used against him by Robert Mueller. And the other one is Roger Stone, who still faces his day in court, but he may actually be the beneficiary of everything that's been happening since then. But Roger stood firm and defended the president and made clear that he had no connection to WikiLeaks. And the question is, why is he still going to stand trial then?
Yeah, these people all need to be pardoned. Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, General Flynn, Papadopoulos. All right, well, we'll just round this out by saying, for those listening, guys, there really are white hats. There are white hats in government. There are white hats in the military. There are white hats that do want to stand for this country, do want to stand for rule of law, and are aligned against the deep state. And again, one of those white hats was Mike Rogers. DeGeneva frames it up.
There's a hero in this entire story, and it's not a lawyer. All the bad people in this story are lawyers. There's a hero. His name is Admiral Mike Rogers. He was the head of the National Security Agency. He discovered the illegal spying. He went personally to the FISA court and briefed the chief judge and worked with her for months to uncover the people who did it. The FISA court has already been told and has already told the Justice Department who lied to that court, and that has been given to Bill Barr already.
Criminal referrals. Devin Nunes referred, I think, 8 criminal referrals onto Barr, too. So, Bill Barr, good guy. Is he going to do what needs to be done?
I hope so. Again, this is where so far he's resisted the political pressure put on him by the Bush networks to distance himself from Trump. It's hard to tell. Sometimes people do rise to the occasion. This is what John Kennedy wrote about in his book in the 50s, Profiles in Courage. People who you might not necessarily expect to do something, and they actually show that streak of courage. And so let's hope Barr is one of them.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes on this story. There's going to be so much breaking news coming out just over the next 30 days, guys. It's just really going to be intense, and it's an exciting time to be alive. So,
People can get in touch with me by sending me an email, and I'll send you the link to my blog page. And I've been covering the story, as you know, for the last, almost 2.5 years. So it's harleysch@gmail.com. That's harleysch@gmail.com. And I always enjoy getting emails from your viewers and your subscribers because they have a higher degree on the whole of political intelligence, and it's a delight to communicate with them.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, the best audience in the world as far as I can tell. So a shout out to my patrons and my wonderful audience. You guys are the best. Thanks for liking this information and sharing it within your sphere of influence. Our guest has been Harley Schlanger from LaRouchePAC.com. Harley, thank you so much.
Okay, Sean. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. And guys, thank you for tuning in. And for real news 24/7, visit us at sgtreport.com, thephaser.com, and thelibertymill.com. Thanks, guys. God bless. Bye-bye.
There are going to be indictments. There's going to be grand juries. John Brennan isn't going to need one lawyer. He's going to need 5.